Oh, the compiling, it hurts. It hurts. It terahertz. We're going to be putting Ubuntu 15.04, or at least showing the steps for putting Ubuntu 15.04 on the Surface Pro 3 tablet laptop thing from Microsoft. Now, there's basically 5 steps. We've got to partition the SSD. We've got to install Ubuntu. We're going to install the drivers. We've got to probably install and recompile the kernel. So I did this with 14.04. It wasn't really a big deal. 15.04 is, I think, using the 3.19 kernel by default. I've forgotten if I've installed that myself or if it comes by default. Pretty sure it's there. The Surface drivers still don't work. I don't know. They were supposed to be in 3.19, but it's not really a big deal to recompile the kernel. It does take 20 gigabytes of disk space to do it the way that I'm going to show you, which is to just apt-get the source and use the running config, which has a lot of stuff you don't really need. So you can do manual config, but I'm going to say that it's probably easier for you to just do it this way. Maybe, possibly. Otherwise, show up at the forums and be like, okay, at this part, substitute the other part. But the first parts are easy. And the first parts are really applicable if you want to brave the dual booting situation. So first off, we've got, Windows here. Not really a big deal. The first thing you want to do is back up all your crap. You need to back up all your crap, put it somewhere else, external hard drive, whatever you need. In order to do this, you're going to need the Surface, whatever you've backed up all your crap to, network drive, external hard drive, whatever. It is helpful if you have a USB hub. The Surface Pro 3 only has one USB 3 port, so I would recommend that you get a USB hub so that you can hook up an external keyboard and mouse, because there's a good chance the touch keyboard is not going to work. And a flash drive. You really need to be able to have a keyboard, mouse, and flash drive hooked up all at once. It also helps if you've got wired Ethernet, because the wireless drivers are a little squirrely sometimes. There is a USB 3 adapter that's got Ethernet and 3 USB 3 ports from Ubuntu. I use that. That worked fine. If you've got a dock, Surface Pro 3 dock, that'll work perfectly. All right, so the first thing you want to do is you want to go inspect your BitLocker situation. You would just go to your C drive and right-click and go to Manage BitLocker. And see the little lock is locked? That means you're using BitLocker. What we're going to do is going to trash BitLocker. So there's a chance that you'll lose everything in your Windows partition. But, back up your stuff. And we're going to back up the key so that when we do this, Windows is going to be like, whoa, I lost the key or something's on fire or whatever. But you will have it backed up. And so you've got some options here. If you've got your Surface Pro 3 linked up to a Microsoft account so that you sign in, like when you log into your Surface Pro 3, it's linked up with Microsoft. Your BitLocker key is probably already backed up in the cloud, for better or worse. Yeah, that's not a good thing. But you can go to your Microsoft account and download your key, your BitLocker key, if anything bad ever happens with BitLocker on your device. But you can also just as easily use this backup your recovery key link. And when you click backup recovery key, it will back up your recovery key to a USB disk or something like that, or your external hard drive or network drive or whatever. Save that because you'll need it. Once you've done that, and once you've backed up all your stuff, the next thing you want to do is go to disk management. Now, I've already done this because I wasn't sure it would work, but you'll want to go to disk management. And so you've got your C drive here. Now, yours is probably going to be a little different. You're probably just going to have this 100 meg healthy partition, Windows C, and then recovery partition. Those are probably just 3 partitions, probably all you'll have. What you want to do is this Windows C, you'll want to right click on that and go to shrink volume. And then you want to shrink it by at least 64 gigabytes. Now, if you've got 128 gig Surface, you're going to be low on space. You could maybe do a little less than 64 gigs. You can maybe do like 30. But if you're going to do that, you're really going to need an SD card, like a micro SD card that you can use in addition to, whatever, so that you can basically have more room to move around. I've got a 256 gig Surface, so things are already sort of cramped enough as it is, and Linux doesn't really benefit tremendously from the internal speed, so I just do everything from a micro SD card. And to recompile the kernel, you're going to need 20 gigabytes of free space, plus or minus. And so if that's a little scary, just do it on an SD card. You'll be fine. Although it will help to do it on a fast SD card, because even on the internal storage, it's going to take about an hour to recompile the kernel, maybe a little more. If you do it on an SD card and the SD card is slow, it could be more like 4 hours. So good luck. All right. With this shrink volume thing, you just want to shrink it down at least, really 64 gigabytes if you can do it. If you can't do 64 gigabytes, the absolute bare minimum, I would say, is probably about 32 gigabytes. So try to do 64. All right. Once you do that, that's going to take a few minutes to run. You're basically all set there. The next thing that you want to do is reboot. Actually, I'm going to do shutdown because we got to get into the UEFI. So what you're going to want to do is hold the volume up button and power, and then let go of power, but keep volume up held. And then you should get this screen, which is basically the UEFI on the Surface Pro 3. There's some handy options in here. Okay, so once you're in here, what you're going to want to do is go to Secure Boot Control, and you're going to want to disable Secure Boot. Disabling Secure Boot is going to let us install Ubuntu, basically. Now, by default, Ubuntu is going to install Grub, but we're actually going to install REFIND, Refind. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that, but it's the EFI bootloader, and it's a little bit better than Grub for the Surface Pro 3. So once you do that, you'll want to put in your Ubuntu 15.04, install USB in a USB port or in the USB hub, because you get your external mouse and keyboard hooked in. And now you'll press and hold volume down and power when you reboot. Holding volume down while the thing is booting will cause it to boot from USB. So you should be greeted by the Ubuntu installer. All right, once the Ubuntu installer comes up, you'll want to tell it to install alongside Windows. Basically, this option will see that you've cleared space on the hard drive. You've resized the partition. There's some empty space. Ubuntu will just go ahead and use that. You can customize this if you want to, but by and large, I'd recommend that you don't, just to ensure that the installation procedure goes correctly. I did some experimentation with this where I was like, oh, let's customize this. I don't need a swap partition, and I want it to boot from EFI. The installer crashed. I'm not really sure if that's something that I did wrong or something that went sort of badly. If you know what you're doing, feel free. But if you don't know what you're doing, it's easier to just let the installer do it and then deal with it later. So like if you want to delete the swap partition later, you delete the swap partition later and then grow the ext partition. That's completely fine. Just keep that in mind. Okay. Once you get Ubuntu booted up, the first thing you're probably going to want to do is apt-get update, apt-get upgrade. Apt-get update, apt-get upgrade with a network connection will connect you to Ubuntu and download updates. You may have clicked download updates during the installer, which may or may not have worked because the wireless on the Surface Pro 3 is a little squirrely. It might have worked if you had it plugged in with a supported USB to Ethernet adapter. Don't know. Do this step, and you can look for Linux kernel, like Linux image, whatever, Linux headers, whatever, in the download list in apt-get, and when you do the apt-get update, apt-get upgrade, in the upgrade list, you can look for the Linux kernel to know if there is actually an updated Linux kernel. And just because there's an updated Linux kernel doesn't mean there's going to be better support for the Surface Pro 3, but there might be. So you should go through the update procedure, look and see if you see the Linux kernel, reboot just to be on the safe side, boot back into Ubuntu, and then the easiest thing to do is to just test the touchpad and keyboard and see if they're working. The touchpad should support 2-finger scroll. So I've got it set up here. I've just got, my 2 fingers doing the 2-finger scroll thing. It basically works fine. There is a patch to, you don't have to patch the kernel to get the touchpad working. You can configure user share x11 xorg.conf.d/10-evdev.conf and set up that to map to the touchpad device. And, tell it what the device is. And there's some stuff on the forum probably, or stuff in the article about doing that. But it doesn't give you 2-finger scroll. It basically just gives you touchpad functionality, and that's it. There's not really any of the other features or gestures like the 2-finger touch and those kinds of things, which you really, if you want full functionality, you basically have to patch the kernel. If your wireless is not working, or if your, battery indicator is not working, you probably need to patch the kernel. If you drop to a terminal, you can do, uname -a to find out what kernel that you're running. And so the kernel that I'm running here is 3.19.0.14 generic, which is almost certainly older than the one that you're running after apt-get update, apt-get upgrade. And taking into account how long this video has been online and that kind of thing. And so the next thing to do would be to get the source for this running kernel the Debian way, which is kind of the Ubuntu way, and then recompile the kernel after patching it for the various Surface devices. So we're going to do that next. Okay, so this guy has written some patches for the Linux kernel, or gathered them up, I should say, and there are several. So this is the instructions for Arch Linux, but it doesn't really matter for our purposes. What we want to do is basically run these commands. We want to sudo apt-get source Linux image uname-r, make sure that works. And then we want to do apt-get build dep for Linux image uname-r, and then that's going to create a folder. Well, the apt-get source creates a folder, and then build dep gets the build dependencies that we'll need to actually build the kernel. And then you'll want to cd into the Linux folder and run from there. Let's see if I can't actually do this. What I've done is I've put in a memory card so that I can have some room to work, because I'm going to need about 20 gigabytes of disk space. I'm going to check df-h dot to see what the free space is. Okay, we use 29. I've got 29 gigs free. This should be enough space. Now I want to do my command to fetch the kernel. All right, so what I'm going to do is sudo apt-get build dep linux image backtick uname-r. What this does is it basically gets the Linux image of the currently running kernel after I've done all my updates. So we're just going to do that. We're going to do apt-get source first, and then we get the build deps. I thought it was already on this SD card. Apparently I'm wrong. And this is where it pays to have a really fast micro SD card, or to give Linux more of a partition than, you know, a few gigabytes. Okay, now we've got our Linux kernel extracted. Now we want to get the build dependencies, basically. apt-get has this great command built in called build dep, which will get all the dependencies necessary to actually build whatever it is you've specified. In our case, the Linux kernel image. Now, I probably already have these, so it's not going to do anything for me, but for you, it's probably going to download a bunch of stuff. Okay, so that's fine. And it is true you can just specify Linux instead of the full Linux image, but old habits die hard. Okay, the next thing that you're going to want to do is get a listing of the stuff in this folder. You should see something like this, Linux 3.19, blah, blah, blah. The next thing we want to do is make sure that we've got Git installed. Okay, we've already got it installed. You may not have. That's fine. Just apt-get install Git. And then the next thing we want to do is download the zip file that contains the patches that we want for the Linux kernel. In this case, it's from Matthew Wardrop's GitHub page. So, all right, so I've gotten that, and I've unzipped master.zip. And so now I've got Linux Surface Pro 3 master. Let's just go in there and look around real quick. Okay, so it looks like we've got some patch files for the buttons, the battery, the cameras, multi-touch, which is what you need for the multi-touch stuff on your screen, and the touchpad and the wake up patch. Okay, this is good. This is actually good. This is what I'm running on my kernel, as a matter of fact. So the next thing that we want to do is go into the Linux folder. This is the actual Linux source. Now from here you can make menu config and blah, 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 but Debian will do all of that for us as long as we've gotten the patch. So now we want to apply the patches. So I'm going to patch-p1 /surface Linux Surface Pro 3 master battery.patch. And actually I've forgotten to, got to do that. Oh, it's owned by root. Probably shouldn't have done that as root, but we'll live. Woohoo! Look at that, patch succeeded. You'll probably get some warning about fuzzing, and what that means is that the patch contains information about precisely what line it should be patching, but it also has enough information that if the exact line numbers change, well, it can look for something that looks similar, plus or minus a few lines, and then patch it anyway. And so in this case, it's saying, well, it found it. It wasn't at the line number specified in the patch file, but it found it and patched okay. There's stuff in patch to make sure that it's not just, patching willy-nilly, or patching, wildly, and you're going to end up with broken files. So patch is actually, if you want to go cross-eyed and learn to see in 7 dimensions, you should look at the source code for patch, because it's kind of awesome, but it's also kind of a brain bender. All right, so we want to do batteries, buttons, multi-touch, wake up. Okay. Now there's no config file because we've just done this, but there's one in the Linux Surface 3 config.x8664. So this is a configuration file that's saying what to turn on your kernel. We could just copy that here. Next thing you want to do is just go ahead and go to root, I guess. And we're in the Linux source folder now, like that we downloaded. There's a folder in here called Debian. And in Debian are commands that you want to run to sort of do this the Debian way. So Debian /rules update configs. And what this is going to do is basically just, okay, so I didn't get the copying the config file right. Big deal. This is just doing a make config, and there are some new options now. And so I'm going to say Surface Pro button driver, yes. Although I could say M for module. We got to go into the scripts folder. Notice that none of these are executable. +X split config.pl. What else we got? +X insert changes.pl. +X. I'm not sure. There's probably a better way to do this. The scripts are not marked as executable by default, so you have to chmod plus x them to tell the system that these files can be executed, like as if they were binary, but they're in fact a script file. And it should work this time, unless we encounter another file that can't that it can't execute. Surface Pro button driver, yes. Surface Pro button driver, yes. Now, yes, compiles it into your kernel. M makes it a loadable module that can be loaded by your kernel. You can make it a module so you can remove the module, but I'm just going to say yes, so it's there all the time and I don't have to think about it. Yay, monolithic kernels for the win. Well, it died again because something was not marked as executable. So I tell you what, let's just mark everything as executable, because why not? chmod-ru plus x. Okay, let's update configs one more time, now that I've marked everything as executable. Okay, that looks good, promising. Okay, the next thing we want to do is use fake root to basically clean everything. And now we actually want to build. So now we want to build it. We're going to use fake root again, but we're going to set an environment variable called auto build to 1. And so this should produce some binary debs for us that we can just dpkg install. Now, this should run and compile the kernel for us and do everything, and actually generate some Debian packages that we can install. So instead of compiling the kernel and then copying the kernel, creating initial RAM FS and doing all that by hand, this will produce Debian packages for us that'll sort of do all of that. It'll automatically reconfigure the initial RAM disk if it needs to, and configure the boot environment and do all that. So this will be kind of nice. This part's going to take a while, so feel free to go get some coffee, whatever. Okay, that compile finished. That took forever. ls ... Alright. So a lot of .deb files have been created here, and we'll want to install them. Probably want to install the generic one. I mean, I guess it builds all of them. You can also do the low latency patch, the low latency version of the kernel if you want to experiment. I'm just going to install that one. And then I want to install the generic version of the headers as well, and the tools. Now that's going to install those. There are better ways to do this, like as a best practice, if you really wanted to, you really should go in and tweak the name of the package so that it's your own name. Like you put in something in the Debian configuration so that it doesn't really conflict with other packages. I'm not really sure that it would. Probably would, but that's probably good enough. Now the next thing you want to do is probably apt-get install refind. This is going to get, now it's already installed here. Alright, so this is going to apt-get the stock version of the Linux headers, and then I'm going to do dpkg-i Linux kernel headers generic. So now the headers will set up correctly. Custom version. And now we want to do apt-get install refind. Now I think it's already on here. Yeah, it is. Well, obviously it is. And so that'll download refind, which will set it up for you. Now, if you're on before Ubuntu 15.04, you're going to have problems. You pretty much need to do a manual installation, which kind of sucks. But once you do that, it's going to do a lot of stuff for you automatically, hopefully. If we go to /boot, which is sort of the EFI boot partition, and we go to EFI, then EFI again. So this is where there's like a binary trusted thing that's going to be part of your EFI. And what we'll actually have to do is reboot and actually make all these trusted. All right, so what you'll want to do once you get in here is you need to create some keys that can be added to the trusted key list. Actually, go to the forum for the commands, because this is who would learn this through a video. This is crazy. But basically, you're going to create some keys that you're going to add to the system that will be trusted. So you'll type some commands, some OpenSSL commands to generate, and then you're going to assign the kernel that you just created so that it'll be trusted. The idea is that you're sort of cryptographically signing your own stuff and telling your UEFI what keys to trust. So theoretically, the binaries that you put on here are ones that would be difficult to compromise. It would be difficult for malware to rewrite that without invalidating the signature, and so theoretically it's more secure. At least that's what they tell us. So what you'll want to do once you do those steps that are in the article is you'll want to then go to your boot EFI folder and make sure that it looks like the article on the website. Basically the layout in boot, you've got boot x64, then you've got the Microsoft folder that has the Microsoft EFI stuff in it, and then you've got the refind folder that has all the EFI stuff in there for Linux. Then you've got a keys folder that has your keys and your certificates. And then there'll be an Ubuntu folder in there that has the Ubuntu stuff. There's a grub2 bootloader that's by default installed by Ubuntu that's in there, probably, if you got it installed in UEFI mode. So, yeah, it's kind of a mess. Okay, once you've done this, then you'll be able to, once you've done the commands, then you'll be able to reboot and go into the UEFI and basically add these files to the trusted list. Now, what it's going to do is it's going to boot you into something called the mock manager, the MOK manager. And then in the MOK manager, you will have the option to enroll a key from disk or enroll a hash from disk or continue boot. You don't want to continue boot yet. We haven't unbroken it. The thing with this sort of tutorial or this sort of overview is that you need to do all the steps. If you stop in the middle, you're going to have a broken system. So hopefully you backed up in the beginning. Basically, you want to enroll the keys that you made earlier. So you should get this shim UEFI key management prompt. And then if you do, you'll want to do enroll key from disk. And then you'll want to go to the keys folder, and you should find lots of CER files, the certificates that you created earlier. You want to add refind.cer, refindlocal.cer, mock.cer, the canonical UEFI ca.der, which is the canonical secure boot key that's signed by, who knows who. And then you'll want to enroll all of those keys. Once you've added all those keys, you'll have to go back up, and then you can use the continue boot option. You should now get the REFIND menu where you see an extensive list of boot managers and kernels to load. The one that you'll want to pick will be the one that has the Surface Pro 3 signed kernel. Now, if for some reason you get an invalid signature, the firmware updates play havoc with this sometimes, so keep that USB stick handy in case you need it. Even though you enroll the keys, you may get an invalid signature detected or something like that. If that happens, just go in the UEFI and disable secure boot. That kind of sucks, and that'll mess with your drive if you're BitLocker encrypted, so be sure you've got the recovery USB handy. Potentially it'll mess with your BitLocker drive. But you shouldn't be getting the invalid signature detected. They fixed that issue about 6 months ago. So you shouldn't get that, and if you do, come over to the forums and I'll try to help you. At this point, REFIND should be set up. The only thing to do is go ahead and try to boot the system. I don't think, for some reason, the Surface Pro 3 doesn't let me. We can see the screen there, but it does not let me. It doesn't let me see the boot screen, which kind of sucks. Now, if you did everything correctly, you should get an REFIND screen similar to this one. Now, yours is going to be different because I've customized the theme on this one a little bit, and honestly, I'm not really done customizing. But I've got my various Ubuntu options over here, a sort of failsafe configuration, whatever option, and then the Windows option here, just to show you that Windows does, in fact, still work with BitLocker and all the stuff. See, I've got it's like, oh, I found my binary whitelist, and then I get the Windows logo here, so you kind of get a little bit of stuff up there, and then it boots into Windows. Possibly it boots into Windows. What's going on? Oh, Windows Update. That figures. But you saw Windows briefly there. And then if I want to do Ubuntu, there we go. Oops, I broke it. Oh yeah. I did not sign the kernel earlier, so because I didn't sign the kernel earlier, we've got this invalid message. So that's going to send me back to REFIND, I think. Oh no, it sent me to Windows. Alright, so we're going to restart again. Okay. So this is what it looks like if you have signed the kernel correctly. It says binary is whitelisted briefly in the top left, and then the system boots normally. So if you forgot to sign your kernel during that step, or you got, the invalid signature error or whatever, you can disable secure boot and boot normally, or boot off of USB and get into a recovery situation, or come over to the forums and we'll help you. So that's the Surface Pro 3 with Ubuntu 15.04. Now, I haven't done anything with the pen. The pen may or may not work, honestly. I haven't done anything with the pen in Linux. The pen is pretty fun in Windows. I really do like OneNote. I think OneNote is a good program. Ubuntu 15.04 is not using Mir, unfortunately, or the Westland compositing thing. Ubuntu is on the verge of something called convergence, which means that your applications run on your phone, your application runs on your tablet, your application runs on your desktop computer. It doesn't really matter. The application responds depending on what screen is available. Microsoft is working on this with Windows 10. Alright, so if I put in my password here, this little icon that's in the upper right-hand corner, it says that it's going to give me Unity. And Ubuntu 15.04 really, in terms of the desktop part of it, they really haven't done much. There's a slightly updated version of Unity. No one cares. The thing that everybody came for is Unity 8. And so I've got Unity 8 configured and associated with this other user account. So this account is configured for Unity 8, and I don't want to mess it up, so we're not going to try to run Unity 8 on that. We can run it here, and that's going to log us into the Unity 8 desktop. So this is sort of mobile, like you could use the touchscreen interface and sort of, drag around this circular thing and do something and log in. So this is Unity 8. And so the idea here is that you would be able to, run these applications and do stuff. Unfortunately, it's kind of broken. It's not ready yet. So this is probably why they didn't leave it as the default in Ubuntu 8. Unity 8's not ready yet. This is pretty much all it does. This is basically a paper mache demo. The idea would be that, when this thing is in tablet mode, this is a touch appropriate interface. But when it's in desktop mode, then you can run applications. You've got a sort of a traditional window manager. But when it's in mobile mode, it's a little different. It works more like a tablet and it lets you convert between them. So I'm really looking forward to the day when this kind of thing actually works. But for now, it does not really work. Even my touchscreen doesn't seem to work in Unity 8, even though it works in Unity 7.3. So that was a little disappointing. So Ubuntu 15.04 is really, if you're using 14.10, there's really no reason not to upgrade to 15.04. There's not a lot of differences between 14.10 and 15.04. If you're on 14.04 because it's a long-term stability release, I think Canonical has forgotten what long-term stable means a long time ago. You're probably fine with 15.04. So let's see if I can get logged out. I don't seem to be able to get logged out. Oh, I've got a sidebar. There's no icons, but I've got a sidebar. Touching the screen does nothing. I think it locked up. Oh yeah, it totally locked up. Wow, I can't even control Alt F1 or control Alt F2. Well, that kind of sucks. Let's reboot. I'll hit the power button, see if it shuts down. No signs of life. All right, well, press and hold the power button until it turns off. And it turned off. Let's turn it back on. It's coming back on. And my keyboard is non-responsive. I've unplugged it and plugged it back in. I'll have to turn it off. Turn it back on again. That's a bug in a UEFI that Microsoft should fix. That's pretty respectable. It's about a 5-second boot time. We're not going to log in as the Unity 8 user again. The system has detected a problem. Really? With Unity 8, you think? Nah, it couldn't possibly be. Couldn't possibly be the case. Look, I have touch. I'm using my finger to do things. Almost broke my documents folder. I'm dragging to select. Notice that I can't click and drag the window with touch. But Chrome works a little better. Chrome works like you would expect it to. So if we go to Forum, see I touch and scroll, touch is working fine. What about pinch to zoom? No pinch to zoom. What about pinch to zoom on the trackpad? No pinch to zoom on the trackpad. But I do have 2-finger scrolling. Well, that's been a quick introduction to Ubuntu 15.04 on the Surface Pro 3. Honestly, you really should follow along the article, and the video is just kind of an overview. So be sure to check out the article, and be sure to check out the article for step-by-step instructions. Be sure to check out the GitHub page, read all the readmes and that kind of thing. So overall, I've been using the Ubuntu 15.04 on the Surface Pro 3 for a month or two, mostly for development, some system administration, some system troubleshooting, that kind of thing. It's very fast. It's capable. With the power management installed, I got a Thermal D. You may have to apt-get install Thermal D to manage the thermal profile of the system. With that and a few tweaks, I'm able to get 6-7 hours of battery life out of it. The battery life in Ubuntu 15.04 with the kernel patches is probably not as good as it is in Windows, but it's really close. I'm actually kind of impressed at how close it is in Linux as it is in Windows. I haven't done anything with the pen. OneNote in Windows is a very powerful application. I would like, if you guys know of something, like does anybody out there have a workflow that's like OneNote, like using OneNote, but for Linux, or that's open source? Because if we could combine MediaWiki with OneNote, I think that might be a killer program, just in terms of pen input and that sort of thing. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a Surface pen. I mean, it could be something that integrates with like the LiveScribe desktop, the pen and paper pen that you can also upload into the computer. So sort of going off on a tangent there. But this is my setup. I kind of like it. I sort of did this video as sort of an off-the-cuff video, not really super formal, just wanted to sort of get it out the door. It's basically step-by-step, but there's a lot of stuff that you could run into that will sort of derail your train fast when you're doing this kind of work. So head on over to the forums and we'll help you the best that we can. But back up all your stuff before you do this, because worst case scenario, you're going to be reinstalling whatever from USB. I mean, if you get it completely wrong, you could hose your disk, you could lose your information. So really be careful with this. You know, no warranty, expressed or implied. I'm Wendell, and I'll see you in the forum.